Habemus Papam. Nella fede e nella tradizione cristiana, i eventissimi cardinali hanno chiamato un nuovo vescovo di Roma.
Throughout history, the papacy has been a position of power and influence, guiding millions of believers and shaping world events. However, not all popes have been virtuous leaders, and some have even been described as evil. These individuals, driven by personal ambition, greed, and lust for power, have left a dark mark on the history of the Catholic Church. This video will delve into the lives and actions of the top 10 most evil popes in history, examining their misdeeds and the consequences of their actions. We will explore their rise to power, scandals, abuse of authority, and the lasting impact they left on the Church and the world. By shedding light on these infamous figures, we hope to provide a comprehensive understanding of the complex and sometimes sordid history of the papacy. Pope Stephen VI, who held the papacy from 896 to 897, is infamous for his role in the Cadaver Synod, a macabre trial of his deceased predecessor, Pope Formosus. Born in Rome, Stephen VI belonged to a powerful Roman family that was part of the political faction known as the Spoleto. He rose through the ranks of the Church, eventually becoming the Bishop of Anagni before being elected Pope. The Cadaver Synod was a grisly episode driven by Stephen's personal vendetta against Pope Formosus, who had supported the opposing political faction. In January 897, Stephen ordered the exhumation of Formosus's 9-month-old corpse and dressed it in full papal regalia. The decomposing body was then propped up on a throne in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, and a deacon was appointed to speak on its behalf. The trial was a farce, with Stephen hurling accusations at the corpse and the deacon feebly responding in defense. Formosus was accused of perjury, coveting the papacy, and violating church law by serving as bishop in multiple regions simultaneously. Unsurprisingly, the outcome of the trial saw Formosus posthumously declared guilty, and his papacy nullified. Following the verdict, the corpse was stripped of its papal vestments and mutilated, with the 3 fingers used for blessing cut off. It was then thrown into the Tiber River, only to be retrieved and buried by a group of sympathetic monks. The Cadaver Synod had severe repercussions for Stephen's own papacy, as public opinion turned against him. The Roman populace, horrified by the gruesome spectacle, revolted, and Stephen was overthrown, imprisoned, and strangled to death in August 897. Stephen VI's actions during the Cadaver Synod not only exemplify the political machinations that plagued the Church during this period, but also demonstrate the extent to which personal vendettas could shape papal actions. His willingness to desecrate the dead and manipulate church law for his own gain marks him as one of the most sinister figures in papal history. Beyond the Cadaver Synod, Stephen's short reign was also marred by his support for brutal military campaigns, which led to the destruction of several cities and the suffering of countless innocent people. His actions were motivated by a desire to assert control over the territories of the Papal States, often at the expense of the common people. Moreover, Stephen's blatant display of power and manipulation of church laws contributed to the erosion of the papacy's moral authority, paving the way for further corruption and abuses of power by future popes. His disregard for the sanctity of human life and church doctrine, as well as his unbridled ambition, secured his place among the most evil popes in history. Pope Benedict XVI, born Theophylactus of Tusculum, was one of the youngest and most controversial popes in history. He held the papacy on 3 separate occasions, from 1032 to 1044, 1045, and finally from 1047 to 1048. Benedict IX came from the powerful and influential Tusculan family, which had strong ties to the Roman nobility. His father, Count Alberic III of Tusculum, ensured his son's election as pope at the young age of approximately 20, despite the fact that he was not yet a priest. Benedict's papacy was rife with immorality, corruption, and scandal. He was known for his wild lifestyle, engaging in acts of debauchery and excess. Many chroniclers of the time, including St. Peter Damian and Bishop Benno of Piacenza, accused him of a wide range of sins, such as adultery, rape, and murder. Benedict's personal behavior brought the papacy into disrepute, severely undermining the moral authority of the Church. In addition to his personal misdeeds, Benedict engaged in the practice of simony, the buying and selling of ecclesiastical positions and privileges. In 1044, a faction of the Roman nobility, fed up with Benedict's scandalous behavior, forced him to flee Rome and elected Pope Sylvester III in his place. However, Benedict returned to Rome with military support and reclaimed the papacy, forcing Sylvester III into exile. In an extraordinary move, Benedict decided to abdicate the papacy in 1045 in exchange for a substantial payment from his godfather, who subsequently became Pope Gregory VI. This act of simony further damaged the papacy's reputation and led to a period of great confusion and instability within the Church. Benedict briefly returned to the papal throne in 1047, but was ultimately expelled from Rome by forces loyal to the newly elected Pope Clement II. Benedict's notorious reign had long-lasting repercussions for the Church. His blatant disregard for the sanctity of the papacy and his willingness to use it as a means of personal enrichment contributed to the growing calls for reform within the Church. The outrage over his behavior and the corruption of the papal office would ultimately lead to the establishment of the College of Cardinals, which was designed to ensure a more orderly and transparent process for electing future popes. Pope Benedict VI's immorality, corrupt practices, and abuse of power left an indelible mark on the history of the papacy. His scandalous behavior and blatant disregard for church doctrine and tradition earned him a place among the most evil popes in history. His actions contributed to the decline of the papacy's moral authority and set the stage for significant reforms within the Church. Pope Sergius III, who reigned from 904 to 911, was another notorious figure in papal history, known for his ruthlessness, immorality, and manipulation. He came to power during a period of instability and violence in Rome, marked by feuding factions among the Roman nobility. Before his election, Sergius had been a prominent and ambitious cardinal, seeking to increase his influence and power within the Church. Sergius III's rise to the papacy was marked by violence and bloodshed. He seized power by overthrowing the reigning Pope Leo V and the anti-Pope Christopher, who were both imprisoned and subsequently murdered, allegedly on Sergius's orders. This marked the first time in papal history that a pope had been directly implicated in the murder of his predecessor. Once in power, Sergius engaged in a reign of terror, consolidating his authority through intimidation and violence. He sought to eliminate any opposition to his rule by ruthlessly persecuting his enemies and their supporters. The climate of fear that pervaded Rome during his reign was a testament to the depths of his cruelty. Sergius was also embroiled in sexual scandals, including an alleged affair with the influential Roman noblewoman Marozia, who was later rumored to be the mother of his illegitimate son. This relationship granted Marozia significant power and influence within the Church, leading to a period known as the Rule of the Harlots, during which members of Marozia's family held sway over the papacy. In addition to his personal misdeeds, Sergius further tarnished the papacy by engaging in simony and nepotism. He appointed numerous relatives to high-ranking ecclesiastical positions, allowing them to amass wealth and power at the expense of the Church. Sergius's actions fueled corruption within the Church and contributed to the further decline of the papacy's moral authority. Sergius III's reign had a lasting impact on the papacy and the Church as a whole. His violent seizure of power set a dangerous precedent for future popes, demonstrating that the papacy could be attained through force and manipulation, rather than merit or divine guidance. This contributed to a growing crisis of legitimacy within the Church, as well as a decline in the moral authority of the papacy. Furthermore, Sergius's relationship with Marozia and the influence of her family over the papacy illustrated the extent to which secular power and wealth could corrupt the Church. This period of corruption and nepotism laid the groundwork for future reform movements that sought to purify the Church and restore its spiritual focus. Pope Sergius III's reign was marked by violence, immorality, and corruption, earning him a place among the most evil popes in history. His actions contributed to the decline of the papacy's moral authority and demonstrated the urgent need for reform within the Church. Pope John XIV, born Octavianus, reigned from 955 to 964 and was yet another controversial and scandalous figure in the history of the papacy. A member of the powerful Roman family known as the Theophylacti, John XIV became pope at the young age of 18, largely due to the influence of his father, Alberic II of Spoleto. His election was highly irregular, as he had not been ordained as a priest before assuming the papacy. John XIV's reign was characterized by debauchery, violence, and corruption. He was notorious for his hedonistic lifestyle, indulging in excessive feasting, gambling, and engaging in numerous sexual affairs, including some with married women and relatives. His immoral behavior and disregard for the sanctity of the papacy shocked many within the Church and led to a significant decline in its moral authority. The young pope's lust for power extended beyond his personal life, as he also sought to expand the territory under papal control. To achieve this, he made a fateful alliance with Otto I, the Holy Roman Emperor. In exchange for crowning Otto as emperor, John secured military support to help him subdue his enemies in Italy. However, this alliance would prove to be his undoing. When John XIV began to fear that Otto was becoming too powerful and sought to distance himself from the emperor, Otto turned against him. In 963, a synod convened by Otto accused John of numerous crimes, including blasphemy, simony, perjury, and even invoking the name of pagan gods. Although the synod's motives were undoubtedly political, the charges against John were widely believed, further tarnishing his reputation and that of the papacy. John was deposed by Otto and replaced by Pope Leo VIII, but he refused to accept his deposition and managed to regain control of Rome with the help of his allies. In the ensuing power struggle, John declared Leo VIII's election invalid and excommunicated all the bishops who had supported him. This plunged the Church into a period of turmoil and confusion as rival factions fought for control of the papacy. John XIV's death in 964 was as scandalous as his life. He reportedly died of a stroke while in bed with a married woman. His legacy was one of moral decay, corruption, and instability within the Church. His personal behavior and abuse of power brought the papacy into disrepute and further eroded its moral authority. Pope John XIV's reign was marked by immorality, corruption, and violence, making him one of the most notorious and evil popes in history. His actions contributed to the decline of the papacy's moral authority and demonstrated the pressing need for reform and spiritual renewal within the Church. Pope Boniface VIII, born Benedetto Catani, held the papacy from 1294 to 1303. Although he was an accomplished canon lawyer and theologian, his tenure as pope was marked by conflicts with powerful secular rulers and acts of corruption, which would ultimately damage the papacy's reputation and authority. Boniface's ambition and desire for power led him into a series of conflicts with European monarchs, most notably King Philip IV of France. Boniface sought to assert the Church's authority over secular rulers and reaffirm the Pope's supremacy in all matters, both spiritual and temporal. This led to a protracted power struggle between the papacy and the French monarchy, culminating in the infamous incident known as the Outrage of Anagni. In 1303, emissaries of King Philip, led by the French nobleman Guillaume de Nogaret, attacked and captured Boniface at his residence in Anagni. They humiliated and abused the elderly pope, planning to bring him to France to stand trial for alleged crimes and heresies. The townspeople of Anagni managed to rescue Boniface, but the experience left him physically and mentally broken. He died just a month later, his papacy forever tarnished by the humiliating episode. Beyond his conflicts with secular rulers, Boniface's papacy was also marred by allegations of corruption, nepotism, and simony. He appointed numerous relatives to high-ranking positions within the Church, ensuring their wealth and power at the expense of the Church's integrity. He was also accused of using his position as pope to enrich himself and his family, further eroding the moral authority of the papacy. One of the most controversial aspects of Boniface's reign was his promulgation of the papal bull Unam Sanctam in 1302. This document asserted the Pope's supreme authority over all secular rulers and declared that submission to the Pope was necessary for salvation. While intended to bolster the Church's authority, Unam Sanctam's provocative claims only served to exacerbate tensions between the papacy and secular powers, ultimately contributing to the decline of the papacy's political influence in the ensuing centuries. Boniface VIII's reign was a turning point in the history of the papacy, as it marked the beginning of a prolonged period of decline in its power and prestige. His heavy-handed attempts to assert papal authority over secular rulers backfired, leading to a weakening of the Church's position in Europe. His involvement in corruption and nepotism further damaged the papacy's moral standing, paving the way for the eventual calls for reform that would culminate in the Protestant Reformation. Pope Boniface VIII's ambition, corruption, and power struggles earned him a place among the most evil popes in history. His actions had far-reaching consequences for the Church, contributing to the decline of the papacy's moral and political authority and setting the stage for future challenges and upheavals. Pope Urban VI, born Bartolomeo Prignano, served as the head of the Catholic Church from 1378 to 1389. His election marked the beginning of the Western Schism, a period of division and conflict within the Church that lasted nearly 4 decades. Urban's tyrannical behavior, violent tendencies, and inability to compromise would ultimately earn him a place among the most evil popes in history. Urban VI was elected pope in 1378, following the death of Pope Gregory XII. His election was initially welcomed by many, as he was seen as a reformer who would address the corruption and excesses that had plagued the Church. However, Urban's harsh and confrontational approach to reform quickly alienated many within the Church hierarchy, including the majority of the cardinals who had elected him. Discontent with Urban's rule soon reached a boiling point, and in September 1378, a group of cardinals declared his election invalid, claiming that it had been made under duress due to pressure from the Roman mob. They subsequently elected a rival pope, Clement VII, who established his court in Avignon, France, effectively dividing the Church and plunging it into the Western Schism. Urban's reign was characterized by paranoia, brutality, and an inability to compromise or unite the Church. He displayed a penchant for violence, ordering the arrest and torture of several cardinals who opposed him, some of whom were eventually executed. His tyrannical behavior, along with his refusal to acknowledge the legitimacy of Clement VII, ensured that the Western Schism would continue for decades. Despite his reputation for violence and tyranny, Urban did make some attempts to reform the Church. He sought to address the issue of clerical corruption by imposing strict regulations on the conduct of priests and bishops, as well as implementing measures to curb the extravagant lifestyle of the papal court. However, these reforms were often overshadowed by his violent outbursts and inability to foster unity within the Church. Urban VI's papacy marked a dark period in Church history, with the Western Schism causing widespread confusion and damage to the Church's credibility. The conflict between the two rival papacies would not be resolved until the Council of Constance in 1417, which saw the election of Pope Martin V and the end of the schism. Pope Urban VI's tyrannical rule, penchant for violence, and role in the Western Schism earned him a place among the most evil popes in history. His actions exacerbated divisions within the Church and contributed to the decline of the papacy's moral authority. While Urban's intentions to reform the Church may have been genuine, his uncompromising approach and destructive behavior ultimately overshadowed any positive contributions he might have made. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, held the papacy from 1492 to 1503. A member of the powerful Borgia family, his reign was synonymous with nepotism, corruption, and moral depravity. Alexander gained the papacy through simony, using his wealth and influence to secure the votes of the cardinals. His time as pope was marked by an unrelenting pursuit of power, as he sought to expand the territories under papal control and establish the Borgia dynasty. Alexander was notorious for his personal excesses and immorality, engaging in numerous extramarital affairs and fathering several illegitimate children. He openly acknowledged his children and used his position as pope to secure prestigious positions and marriages for them, further consolidating the Borgia family's power. Alexander's flagrant abuse of the papacy to further his family's ambitions severely damaged the Church's reputation and contributed to the growing calls for reform. Pope Leo X, born Giovanni de' Medici, was the pope from 1513 to 1521. A member of the powerful Medici family, Leo X was known for his lavish lifestyle, extravagance, and love of the arts. While his patronage of artists such as Raphael and Michelangelo contributed to the flourishing of the Renaissance, his financial mismanagement and focus on worldly pursuits would have disastrous consequences for the Church. In order to fund his extravagant lifestyle and ambitious building projects, Leo X resorted to the sale of indulgences, a controversial practice that allowed individuals to purchase the remission of sins. This blatant exploitation of church doctrine for financial gain was a significant factor in sparking the Protestant Reformation, led by Martin Luther, who famously nailed his 95 Theses to the door of All Saints' Church in Wittenberg in 1517. Leo X's mismanagement of church finances and his focus on material wealth and power over spiritual matters ultimately led to a schism within Christianity. As the Protestant Reformation gained momentum, and entire nations broke away from the Catholic Church. The long-term consequences of his actions would shape the course of European history for centuries to come. Both Pope Alexander VI and Pope Leo VI are considered among the most evil popes in history due to their corruption, moral depravity, and abuse of power. Their actions during their respective reigns contributed to the decline of the papacy's moral authority and played a significant role in the events leading up to the Protestant Reformation. These two popes serve as stark examples of the negative impact that unchecked power and ambition can have on the Church and its faithful. Pope Stephen VI, who reigned from 896 to 897, is best remembered for the infamous Cadaver Synod, a macabre and bizarre event that left a lasting stain on the history of the papacy. Stephen's hatred for his predecessor, Pope Formosus, was so intense that he exhumed Formosus's corpse, dressed it in papal vestments, and put it on trial. The deceased pope was found guilty of a variety of charges, including perjury and illegal accession to the papacy. Formosus's body was then mutilated, with his papal vestments removed and 3 fingers from his right hand severed before being thrown into the Tiber River. The Cadaver Synod was widely regarded as a grotesque spectacle and an affront to the dignity of the papacy. Stephen's actions were driven by political motivations, as he sought to discredit and delegitimize Formosus's reign. The public outrage that followed the trial ultimately led to Stephen's deposition and imprisonment, where he was later strangled to death. Pope Paul IV is known for his fervent pursuit of heretics. Pope Paul IV was responsible for the strengthening of the Roman Inquisition and the creation of the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, a list of prohibited books deemed heretical or immoral by the Church. His zealous enforcement of religious orthodoxy led to the persecution of many, including scholars, scientists, and artists. Pope Innocent IV is remembered for his role in the conflict between the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. As pope, he sought to weaken Frederick's power and authority by excommunicating him multiple times and encouraging rebellion among his subjects. Innocent IV is also notable for authorizing the use of torture to extract confessions from heretics, a decision that would have far-reaching and brutal consequences. Pope Clement VII was a member of the Medici family. Pope Clement VII's reign was marked by political indecisiveness and a failure to address the growing threat of the Protestant Reformation. His excommunication of England's King Henry VIII and refusal to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon ultimately led to the English Reformation and the establishment of the Anglican Church. Pope Julius II, nicknamed the Warrior Pope, Julius II was known for his aggressive military campaigns and expansionist ambitions. Although he was a patron of the arts and commissioned the construction of St. Peter's Basilica, his focus on territorial gains and military power often overshadowed his spiritual responsibilities. These popes, along with the others mentioned in this essay, demonstrate the darker side of papal history and the potential for corruption and abuse of power within the Church. While the papacy has also been home to many virtuous and pious leaders, These infamous figures serve as reminders of the importance of maintaining a balance between spiritual and temporal power, as well as the need for ongoing reform and accountability within the Church. Pope John XXII was notorious for his avarice and love of wealth, amassing a vast personal fortune through the sale of indulgences and the imposition of taxes on the clergy. He also faced criticism for his theological views, particularly his denial of the doctrine of the beatific vision, which states that the souls of the blessed can see God directly in heaven. Like his predecessor, Pope Benedict XIV was criticized for his financial policies and imposition of taxes on the clergy. He also faced accusations of nepotism, with several of his relatives appointed to high-ranking positions within the Church. Pope Alexander VII was known for his love of luxury and extravagance, particularly in his patronage of the arts and architecture. While his support of artists such as Bernini and Borromini helped to shape the Baroque style of the time, his focus on material wealth and grandeur was criticized by many as being at odds with the Church's spiritual mission. Pope Leo XIII was a polarizing figure, revered by some as a champion of social justice and workers' rights, and criticized by others for his opposition to modernism and embrace of conservative views. His encyclical Rerum Novarum, which addressed the rights and duties of workers, had a significant impact on the development of Catholic social teaching. While these popes may not be remembered as the most evil or corrupt figures in papal history, they nevertheless contributed to the complex legacy of the papacy, and their actions continue to shape the Church today. Their successes and failures serve as a reminder of the challenges and responsibilities that come with holding one of the most powerful and influential positions in the world.